beaten to death. In other cases, prisoners were asphyxiated. One of the documents we got is an autopsy report that describes a prisoner who was found hanging from his wrists in a cell with a gag in his mouth, and he had been beaten to death. So that's the kind of document, I think, that you don't expect to find in U.S. government custody. It's the kind of document you expect to see discussing some abuse in Saddam Hussein's prisons or something like that, not something that you expect to see from the United States. So, you know, I think that those autopsies are evidence of how far some of these abuses actually got. Now, more recently, over the summer, we got a report from the CIA's Inspector General. This is a 400-page report that the CIA's Inspector General wrote in 2004 about the CIA's detention and interrogation program. And what the CIA Inspector General said in 2004 is that he had real doubts about the legality of some of the methods that were being used, and he had real doubts about the effectiveness of the methods that were being used. And that was in 2004. And those methods kept being used after 2004. They kept using these methods right up till 2005 in some cases, and in other cases 2007 they were using some of the same methods. Now, the reason that the Inspector General report is important is because it was the Inspector General's report that Attorney General Holder referred to when he said that he was initiating this criminal investigation. He said that he had read the report, he was affected by the report, and he thought that he had no choice but to initiate a criminal investigation. So I want to come back to, I don't want to leave you with the impression that all of this information, that we now know the full scope of the Bush administration's torture policies and the torture program, because we don't. There's still a lot of information that's being withheld. There are, for example, interrogation directives for the special forces in Afghanistan that we haven't been able to get through the Freedom of Information Act. There are also that Inspector General report I just mentioned is heavily redacted, meaning lots of pages are blacked out altogether on national security grounds, and we're trying to get those pages as well. And then finally, there are photographs. Some of you may have seen this in the news over the last couple of days, but there's a set of photographs of abuse at facilities other than Abu Ghraib. And those photos have been withheld for the last 5 years. We were able to win in the district court and the appellate court. We got orders from those courts requiring the disclosure of these photographs. But very recently, Congress passed a law that gives the Defense Department the authority to withhold the photos, and Secretary Gates, the Secretary of Defense, invoked that law on Friday to withhold these photos. So we're going to keep fighting for them, but right now they're being withheld. So there's a lot of information that's still being withheld. In fact, a remarkable, given how much effort has gone into getting information released, not just effort by the ACLU, but by all sorts of other organizations and by the media as well. It's quite remarkable how much information is still being withheld. But I think that even more remarkable than that is how little has been done with the information that has been released. We still do not have a congressional investigation into the roots of the torture policies or the torture program. There has been nothing resembling a congressional investigation. We still don't have a criminal investigation beyond the very narrow one that I described, an investigation that looks only at the actions of rogue interrogators. And while the Bush administration said that the people who were responsible for these abuses would be held accountable, only low-level soldiers have been held responsible for those abuses. No more senior official has been held responsible. And in fact, many of the people who should have been held responsible have been promoted to higher positions or have been given awards for their work in government. So it's really, a shameful situation. Now, that's on the criminal side. You know, I'm complaining about the scope of the criminal investigation because I do think that crimes were committed. I think that if you look at these documents, it's impossible to come to any other conclusion. But the other possibility that has been out there is civil responsibility, because ordinarily victims of government abuse can bring litigation in federal courts to get recognition for, acknowledgement for, and compensation for the abuses that they suffered. There have been a number of cases in which prisoners who have since been freed by the United States, or prisoners who are victims of the CIA's rendition program. The rendition program is the program under which the CIA kidnaps foreign nationals and takes them to other countries to be tortured in those countries. There have been many cases in which individuals who are the victims of those kinds of programs have brought suit in American courts. But thus far, those suits have been stymied by the government's procedural arguments. The government doesn't come into court and say, we didn't engage in torture. Instead, what it does is it comes into court and it says things like, this case involves the CIA's rendition program, and the rendition program is a state secret, meaning it's so secret that we can't litigate this case. And so far, the CIA has been able to prevail in that argument. There's a case in Canada. There's a Canadian citizen. Some of you know this story. Maher Arar is a Canadian citizen who was picked up at JFK, sent to Syria, tortured in Syria for almost a year, eventually let go when they determined they had the wrong guy. He has been given compensation by the Canadians, who had a relatively marginal role in his rendition to Syria. The United States has refused to take responsibility, has refused to provide compensation of any kind. We represented another victim of the CIA's rendition program, Khalid al-Masri, who is a German national who was picked up in Macedonia, sent to Afghanistan, tortured there for 5 months before they found out that they had the wrong guy, sent back home. He has been, there's a long report written by a European investigator that discusses his case, corroborates virtually all of his allegations. Nobody has made the argument that what he's saying is untrue, but the United States has failed to even acknowledge the case, let alone provide compensation. So these kinds of I think when people talk about the changes that have taken place since the Obama administration took office, they point to some important decisions that President Obama made in the first days. For example, the decision to close Guantanamo, the commitment to close Guantanamo, or the decision to shut down the CIA secret prisons. And I think those are very important decisions that President Obama made, and that the administration deserves credit for having made those decisions. But where the Obama administration has failed to make any meaningful progress is on this issue of accountability. On accountability, the Obama administration simply refuses to make decisions that I think it knows are the right decisions, but that it believes will come with a political cost. And ultimately, it's true that it was the Bush administration's torture policies that undermined the United States' moral authority abroad and that undermined the rule of law here at home. But the Obama administration's failure to hold accountable any of the people responsible for those abuses is only going to compound the harms that the Bush administration caused. It's a critical moment right now because President Obama has to make a decision, and Attorney General Holder has to make a decision about the scope of this investigation. The investigation, as I mentioned, is very narrow. There's the possibility of expanding it, and we need to make sure that Attorney General Holder knows that it's important to Americans that that investigation be broad enough to reach not just the interrogators, but the people who ordered torture and the people who facilitated it. And so a lot of our work at the ACLU right now is dedicated to getting that message across to the administration. I know a lot of you are involved in organizations that do work on this issue as well. I hope that your work is also directed to that same end. I'm glad that this event is taking place right now because, as I said, I think it's a kind of crucial moment. And I think this idea that Shaquille has had of sending the administration a message through this video is a very good one. It's a crucial issue. It's a crucial time. Thanks again for inviting me, and I think we're going to do questions and a little later on. Thanks.